Greetings, adventurer. Welcome back to D20 Academy. I'm your host, Shalo Kaneshiro, and today is episode 16, Customizing Your Character. Alright, so today I'm going to be going over customizing your character, whether that means talking about multiclassing, taking different feats, anything kind of in these 5th edition rules that kind of help you separate your character from others. Not really like thematically, not really talking about like, making your character unique whether it comes to like background, personality, and appearance and stuff, but more rules-wise, ability kind of things that you can take to help, kind of separate your character from other ones, make them unique, and kind of make them start going down the path that you want them to. Real quick, I want to make this very brief. If you haven't noticed, I haven't posted an episode in like 2 months. My life's been really crazy with so many different things. One of those actually is I'm working on a show, which, will probably be out on YouTube, hopefully in a month or two as we move into post-production. I will keep you updated. But yes, I am back, as you can tell, with way better audio equipment as well. I'm super excited to jump right back in to D20 Academy. My plan is to be posting every Tuesday, except the first Monday of every month. I want to be doing Monster Mondays. But other than that, I want to be posting every Tuesday, keeping up with all this awesome content that I really enjoy making, and hopefully you guys enjoy listening to. Alright, without further ado, let's get into customizing your character. Alright, so we're going to start with multiclassing. So I've talked a lot about classes on the podcast. Their strengths, their weaknesses, the play types they match up with. If you haven't been keeping up with the podcast, I've been releasing class spotlights, which are whole episodes dedicated just to talking about a certain class. So if you are kind of new to the game or interested in maybe figuring out a class you want to play, or maybe you've already played the game a lot, but either want a refresher on the classes or hear about classes that you've probably never played before, go ahead, check out those class spotlights. I'm going to continually post those as well. Kind of keep up posting Monster Mondays and class spotlights periodically. But even beyond that, I've talked about kind of the way you build your party balance and stuff, and that a lot of that includes talking about classes and all that. So I have talked a lot about classes. It's a really big part of the game. And basically, if you're kind of unfamiliar, just real quick, the class is kind of like your character's kind of profession, their focus. So there's like barbarians who are melee weapon fighters. They have lots of health. The strategy is like running into battle and things. There's like wizards who are good at casting spells and having that flexibility with spell casting, and there's so many different kinds of classes: rogues, rangers, clerics, and it's a really cool part of the game. It's one of the things that kind of separates your character. Different characters, all of different classes coming together to form a party is one of the best parts of the game. But there is this thing called multiclassing. I believe multiclassing began in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. There was kind of like 2 kinds of things. There was multiclassing, which was really confusing and unstrategic way to like split your experience points into leveling into more than one class, and it was pretty complicated and confusing. And then there's dual classing, which was actually only available to people who played humans, and it is so strange and thematically confusing. I'm not even going to try to explain it to you. Yeah, that was kind of a mess in 2nd edition. 3rd edition made the system much simpler in 3.5, and more strategically advantageous, to take feats. To multiclass. But it still very much had its kinks, and I will start talking a little bit more about feats in 3rd edition a little bit later. 4th edition multiclassing was kind of akin to dip classing more than multiclassing. In the sense, dip classing is kind of the concept that you have your main class, right, your main focus, but then you kind of dip into little little like just a couple levels into just these other side classes to gain these certain abilities that just enhances your character. So it wasn't too bad of a system, but it was, whatever in 4th edition. Basically, here's how it works in 5th edition. Basically, multiclassing is the concept that you're taking levels in multiple classes. So you're kind of splitting up your focus to, be more, have more diversity in your skills and strengths and stuff. So every class requires certain prerequisites when it comes to ability scores. So like barbarians require 13 strength, clerics require 13 wisdom, warlocks require 13 charisma, so on and so forth. Just because basically if you don't have high numbers in those ability scores, multiclassing into it is going to be a pretty bad idea. You're not really going to get anything out of it. So there is, you need certain XP to level up, certain experience points to level up in the game. And when you get to enough XP to get to the next level, you can either take another level in the class that you're currently in, or the first level in another class. So basically, if you're have 6 levels in cleric and one level in fighter, you have to gain enough XP to reach level 8 before you can either take your 2nd level in fighter or your 7th level as a cleric. So it's a little confusing. You're still progressing the same amount as the other players, so you still need the same XP to get to the next level. But instead of just getting the next level in your one class, you can split up getting levels into these 2 or even 3 or 4 different classes. Your hit points are also kind of managed based on your class. Each class has a certain hit die, so whether it be a D8 or a D10 or a D6, you just kind of combine those together to create your hit point maximum, so that's not too confusing. And your proficiency bonus is equal to all your levels added up together. So if you're a cleric 6 and a fighter 2, you're going to have the proficiency bonus of an 8th level character, essentially. You also gain some proficiencies when you go into those classes, so you're not completely helpless. Like if you're a wizard going into fighter, you need to be able to gain those martial weapon proficiencies to even be useful at all as a fighter. So that's kind of nice. And then you just, you gain the features and stuff the same as always. There is some certain class features and things that it goes into in the player's handbook. Like, for example, if you have the extra attack feature from 2 different classes, they don't stack. And then it kind of explains spellcasting, which I'm not going to go into here. It's not super complex, but it might just take a while to explain. Definitely if you're not already familiar with how spellcasting works in the game. But, it's a pretty balanced system. It's pretty cool. Yeah, so why would you multiclass, right? It's to kind of broaden your character's focus. So, whether they're into like melee, ranged weapons, spellcasting, buffing their allies, maybe like utility things, like being able to sneak around, pick locks, track monsters, heal allies, whatever. Your character's focus is very dependent on your class, and multiclassing helps broaden that a bit more. So how does this kind of impact the party balance, right? Party balance is really important. I actually have a whole episode on it. But it's basically like making sure that everyone around the table is having fun and making sure that the party has enough balance to deal with any of the problems that they might have to face. Right? So just real quick, kind of in party balance, you want someone who, will be able to, maybe in a battle situation, go right into the fray, take lots of damage, but still keep standing. Someone who can help heal the other allies. Someone with lots of spellcasting, so they can, be flexible in certain situations. So party balance is pretty important when it comes to a game. Definitely when it comes to making sure everyone's having fun, make sure everyone's happy. So how does multiclassing affect this? Because essentially, party balance relies on people taking different classes so everyone feels special, everyone has their own strengths and stuff. And multiclassing kind of changes that. If you have a low amount of players in your campaign, 2 or 3, I think 4 is like the perfect amount of players for a campaign. 4 players and then a dungeon master. But if you have like 2 or 3 players, maybe even just 1 player, multiclassing can be pretty good because you are, you're making sure you can deal with all these different kinds of problems. So like, for example, if you have a player, and they're like a barbarian, right? So they can like stick soaking up this damage and everything, in battle, and you have a cleric who can heal and also has some magic capabilities. But you kind of run into a situation where you need someone to be able to sneak around, steal something, maybe spy on someone. One of those two characters might multiclass into rogue or multiclass into ranger, to get, more class features and stuff to better equip them to deal with that kind of situation. Once again, if you have lots of players, you're probably going to have a rogue or probably have a ranger, and that's their job. That's going to be their strength, in dealing with situations like that. So I think when you have a low amount of players, multiclassing can be pretty good because, you can make sure you cover all the bases, be able to deal with all the problems. But I do not think that if you have a lot of players in your game, that you should have players multiclass. Like I explained, party balance and people having their specific focus, their specific strengths, allows all the players in the game to feel special, to have fun. And when you start to kind of divert that away, kind of take that away from certain players, and pile it onto one, that can really, ruin the fun for the table. Right? If you have someone who's a rogue and their character is really good at sneaking around, really good at spying on people, really good at picking locks, they've really helped out the group a lot because of this skill set. They feel special, they feel needed in the group, they're having a lot of fun. And another player begins multiclassing into rogue, getting those same abilities. They don't really need that rogue as much anymore because this other character, can, do some of this rogue stuff, and they also have this other skill set. Maybe they're also a fighter or a cleric or something. And so that kind of ruins the fun, makes people feel less special, moves the spotlight more onto just one or two people who are like multiclassing, taking all the skills, being super versatile and everything. So I think if you have lots of players, if you already have really good party balance, then multiclassing is really not needed. Once again, I think if you are a DM, it's not really your job to tell players that they can't do things, that you can't be an elf or you can't be a barbarian or this stuff. I think it's part of the fun for players is, building their own characters, making it unique, playing things they want to play. Ultimately D&D is about fun, and it's playing a game, so you want people to be able to play the things they want to play so they can have the most fun. And maybe, they do want to multiclass and all this stuff, but just, you do have to be wary to make sure that they're not ruining the fun for other people at the table. So if you think that multiclassing may kind of be a point of contention for your group, make sure you talk about it with them. Make sure that everyone is on the same page, and everyone is okay with it, because it can definitely be one of those things at the table that kind of sneaks up, and it's kind of an unsaid thing, and people start to lose interest and start having less fun and stuff. So just make sure that you're aware of that as a DM, and also as a group, even if you're a player. Make sure if you want to multiclass or you see someone else multiclassing and you think it may not be the best idea just because it's taking some of the spotlight away from other players, make sure to bring it up so you can solve that immediately. Okay, so strength of multiclassing, right? You get variation, you become kind of a jack of all trades kind of situation. And then, of course, the weaknesses of multiclassing is you're not really good at any specific thing. And then, of course, taking the other player's spotlight and such. So, just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and stuff with that. But multiclassing can be really cool, a way of customizing your character, right? One of the kind of big, more popular things when it comes to multiclassing is like taking levels in fighter and wizard, because people like, being a weapon fighter, being able to battle, and then also have the flexibility of casting spells. So that's really cool, and I really like that. And if that's kind of something you're gonna do as a player, that's cool. Once again, make sure it's not taking away the fun from anyone or anything like that. However, I don't want to talk about multiclassing real quick. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. As a player, if you're multiclassing, there is in 5th edition kind of, well, if you listen to class spotlights or if you've kind of played the game, you know about all these classes have subclasses, right? So for fighters, it's, I believe they're just called archetypes, and then for clerics, they're like domains, and then wizards, they're like schools of magic. Basically, when you get to like first, second, or third level, you have this choice between these different kind of specialties in your class, and then at certain levels, you gain more class features based on which path you took. And this is a cool way to further customize your character, make them better at a certain kind of thing, or maybe even make them more versatile. So multiclassing is less popular and less common in 5th edition because of these subclasses and these archetypes and such. So I've been talking about multiclassing for like 10 minutes now. You may not even ever see it come up in your game, but yeah, I mean, it is kind of an interesting thing. I'm glad they have rules for it in 5th edition. I think it can be kind of cool. The game I'm running now has 4 players, and I think 3 of them have actually multiclassed. And it's not really been a problem at all. And, it was more for things for their character, story beats and character development, things that happen to their character that, kind of that they chose to make the shift into different kind of classes. But yeah, it's been fun in my campaign so far, and I think it can be really cool. Definitely for experienced players, people have played a lot. They want something new, something fresh in their game, so there might be multiclassing kind of a lot. But yeah, that's kind of a talk on multiclassing, and let's get into feats, because they're awesome, and I really want to talk about them. Okay, so feats, they're kind of a way to personalize and customize your character's skill set and strengths. They're kind of like extra features, that's what they are, right? They're feats, talents, kind of these abilities that you can gain, that allow you to be more skilled in this specific area. I believe feats began, in the 3rd edition. It was kind of like near the end of 2.5, which is kind of like this transition edition. They were releasing lots of content at that time, to really detail the game, make it more complex, make customizing your character way more intense. And so in 3rd edition, you gained a feat like every 3rd level. They were pretty detailed, and there were tons of them. They released lots of supplements for 3rd edition 3.5, and eventually there was like 100, like maybe even more, just feats, which, just all these tiny little, very specific abilities that you can choose from, to further customize your character. And I want to get into this a little more later, but it was cool for the intellectuals, the people who had the time to read up on all that stuff, really cared about optimizing their character, making their character really powerful. But it really wasn't, first of all, was not friendly to new players at all, because it's very daunting having to choose from this crazy array of feats. And also encouraged lots of character optimization and caring more about combat and everything than, role playing or any other aspect of the game. But I think a lot of people did enjoy it and stuff, and the system wasn't totally broken or ruined. Now in 5th edition, feats are quite nice. I'm going to go into why I like them and why I hate them in a second. But basically in 5th edition, you can take a feat in place of an ability score improvement. So essentially, every 4 levels in D&D 5th edition, I think that's not always the case. Maybe it's like near the end, it's only like every 3 or 5 levels. Anywho, basically, every 4 levels, you get an ability score improvement as your as your bonus for getting that level. And it's either, basically that means you can add a bonus to one of your ability scores, right? Strength, Constitution, Intelligence, whatever. Either get a +2 bonus to one of those, or a +1 bonus to 2 of them. So this is a really cool way to make your character stronger. Obviously, you want to be putting bonuses into, the abilities they use the most and such, so your character gets stronger. Really, really, really simple thing. Ability and score improvements are cool. I think it's a really good system that they built into 5th edition. Now, if you would ever get an ability score improvement, instead of doing that bonus to one of your ability scores, you can instead choose to take a feat. So this means you can take your first feat at 4th level. There is an exception. There is a variant human race option. So if you choose human, the most common thing is you get +1 to every ability score. But you can choose a variant human that's in the player's handbook if your DM allows it, that provides +1 to 2 ability scores and then a feat of your choice, which means you can have a feat at level 1, which is really cool. I really like that variant human. It can get a little out of hand for some parties, definitely, for some crazy players. But yeah, so feats basically, they make character better at a specific thing, like whether it's using a certain kind of weapon, expanding your proficiencies, being good at fighting a certain kind of enemy, something like that. I'm not going to go over every feat in the 5th edition Player's Handbook. Thankfully, there's really not a lot. It's quite digestible for new players. Yeah, the feats I think are really interesting, and also kind of weird because they're so dependent on the character, the campaign, the setting. Because of their specificity, some feats are amazing for a certain character in a certain campaign and then useless for another character in another campaign. But this makes them feel really customizable in a way to make your character more unique. That is really what I like about it. Feats allow you to adapt your character to the campaign and, make the character more unique. And, it's really great. You'll see what I mean in a second when I kind of start going over some of the feats. I just do want to touch on something that, it kind of happens a lot in D&D. Like when you get a new level, you get a new feature from your class and such. Same with feats. Taking a feat has a weird effect thematically, because it's like, how did this character suddenly get this skill or get this ability? It's kind of a thing that's just a part of D&D that you just kind of have to work through. If you're just a fighter and suddenly you reach 5th level and you attack twice as fast as you did before and stuff. Or sorcerers suddenly can do these crazy things with their spells overnight. Which is just something you just kind of have to figure out, and most of the people just accept, and that's just how it is, and don't really put some thought into it. But yeah, the same with feats. You're gaining these abilities, these sometimes these special kinds of actions that you just kind of get. Just kind of get them. And your character just suddenly knows how to do this stuff. And it's a little weird, just thematically. You can figure it out if you want. Most people just are just yeah, we'll just accept it. That's just how it is. That's how the game works. Sure. And it's fine. And it's not too bad. That's kind of just what I do in my campaign. But, it is just kind of a thing you notice, once you start reading through the Player's Handbook or start playing the game. That's just a little weird. But it's just a part of the game. I don't really know how else you can fix it or whatever without making it complex and laborious. Okay, so real quick, I'll just kind of go over these feats, just kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So, starting at the top, there's a feat called Alert. The description is always on the lookout for danger. You gain the following benefit. You gain a +5 bonus to initiative. You can't be surprised while you're conscious, and other creatures don't gain advantage on attack rolls against you as a result of being unseen by you. Basically, there's these 3 different abilities you kind of get. 3 different little features you get when you take this feat, which basically just makes your character more alert, right? Always on the lookout for danger, as the feat says. So this is really neat because maybe in your campaign, there's a lot of enemies who have been jumping you, been surprising you, ambushing you and such. That's just kind of how the campaign is. Those are the kind of enemies you've been facing a lot. Once you get to 4th level, you've realized this trend, and you take Alert so you can just be better equipped to face these enemies. Right? That's really cool. It makes your character better equipped to deal with these problems. Helps customize your character more, make them more unique and different from just any old person who's just taking an ability score improvement. And so that is really cool, right? But then maybe in a totally different campaign, having these like different kind of features hardly matter. Just the way you're playing the game, the way your party deals with problems, the monsters the DM throws at you and such. This feat may not be any help to you at all. So stuff like that is just really interesting. Now, I do have the book in front of me here, so if you hear me flipping through pages, that's what it is. There are some pretty basic, just combat-focused feats. So like dual wielder, heavily armored, great weapon master, grappler, things like that. Either making you better with certain kinds of armor, or certain like big weapons or range weapons. Some of them are really strong, and are definitely better than taking that ability score improvement. Just making your your attacks and making you really powerful in combat. Most notably, great weapon master, and where is it? Great weapon master, savage attacker, and sharpshooter. Those ones are quite good. If you want to kind of combat focus your character more. But then there are also quite specific feats depending on your character, depending on your campaign. For example, there's one called Tavern Brawler, which really just helps you if you're brawling a lot with just your fists. And so if you find yourself in lots of bar fights and stuff in the campaign, you can take that and become better at that. Observant, if you want your character to be able to like read lips, or just be more perceptive, depending, maybe there's lots of investigation, lots of things that you should notice in your campaign. Mage Slayer, if you're fighting lots of wizards. In the campaign I'm running, like the main evil race of monsters are all magic users, and one of my players took Mage Slayer, and it's been really, really effective. But even beyond these combat-focused things, there's like Inspiring Leader, which I think is a feat you probably take once your character reaches a certain point, kind of completes a part of their character arc, becomes a leader. Because it's not a super good ability, and it's definitely not versatile. It definitely depends on your character and the campaign. But that could be really something cool, if you're not caring so super much about optimizing your character and more about your, their story arc and such. Like Linguist, you can learn new language, create like written ciphers. There's like Actor, which makes you better at, being able to like lie to people, but then also being like a performer. And yeah, it's just really cool. Feats are just really interesting. It's just really cool to be able to make your character more skilled at a certain thing. Back to that kind of party balance thing, making them feel more special, because they have this new strength. They're skilled in this area. So yeah, those are kind of some of the feats. I do want to just mention real quick. There's this feat called Lucky, and if you've played the game with anyone as it, or you've seen like lots of things online, Lucky is kind of a meme in the D&D community because it's really powerful. Lucky basically means that you have 3 luck points, and you can spend a luck point to roll an additional d20 and take whichever roll you want. And you gain all your luck points back when you finish a long rest. This feat may not sound like much, but it is insane. Oh, not only that, if there's a roll that's made against you for like an attack against you, you can roll a d20 and then choose that lower result instead. So like you don't get critical hit or something. Lucky is amazing. It's just versatile. Any campaign, any character can take it. It's really useful. It's not like super broken that maybe you should ban it in your games or anything. But it's quite good. And if you are a new player or someone who kind of wants to get into feats, can't decide or is a little daunted by kind of the detail in some of these feats or the amount of them, go with Lucky because it's really good and you're always going to be using it all the time. Okay, so as I've mentioned before, I have not played D&D as a player very much. For the most part, I am a DM. But I do have some experience with feats as a player, kind of playing a character. They're, like I said, they're really cool. One of the characters I made was a variant human, so he got a feat at first level. And I believe the one that I took is... Try to find it. I want to say it's something like observant or keen mind, something along those lines. It was just because my character was, kind of a scholar, more of a slower, more observant kind of character, and I chose the feat to accentuate that character's skill set. And I really liked it. I was using it quite often. It was cool that I had, kind of this special little skill. I felt like more, my character was more unique and more different, and so that's really good. Now, as a DM, my experience with feats is also quite positive. Lots of the players, definitely in my current campaign, they've taken feats of all kinds. The first few times after they've chosen it, and they're in a battle or something, an encounter that you've planned, and they, bust out all these things that they've gotten from this feat. It's a little hard at first, just because you weren't totally aware of maybe how powerful or how different this would change the battle. And then you just kind of have to start, planning your encounters accordingly. But it hasn't gone horribly or anything. I think feats have definitely made the characters stronger than if they hadn't taken them and taken the ability score improvement instead. But some of them have been taken as story beats and character arc things, and I think it's really cool. Now, I should also point out about feats that there's this thing kind of with feats and optimizing your character, and this goes back to 3rd edition. If you played 3rd edition or 3.5 edition, it was very much like you have to optimize your character. You just kind of have you kind of get this feeling that you just need to, if you want to keep up with anyone, you need to be optimizing your character, taking the best feats for your character's specialties and their weapon type and all this kind of stuff. And listen, I don't think character optimization is bad at all. There's this weird stigma that character optimization and role-playing are countering each other, and I don't think that at all. I think optimizing your character can definitely help you roleplay your character even better. But also, being into this mindset of having to optimize your character to catch up with everyone, definitely if it's not something you really want to do, I think it's kind of negative, and the feats in 3rd edition and 3.5 kind of had that effect. Now in 5th edition, it's definitely not as much that vibe at all. There's way less. It's much less daunting, much less crazy. There's only about I think 20, maybe, in just the player's handbook. Obviously, there's more getting released as they release more content and more little side books. But if you just take the player's handbook, there's only about 20 to look at. But also, some of them are kind of, I don't know, they're not balanced. First of all, there's the 5th edition feats are very not balanced. Obviously, there are very specific campaigns, very specific characters where a feat might be good, but there are just in general just way worse feats than other ones. Which, once again, if you don't care much about that stuff, that's fine, right? If it's a character thing, it's a story beat thing, that's amazing, take the feat. But I did kind of wish they were a little more balanced. Sometimes if just one more little feature, or one more little change to something, would make someone take it. But, I do like that they're not as much about optimizing your character and stuff, and, there are these more specific ones that have nothing to do with combat, and can be used more, right, to, if your campaign is more role-playing based or investigation based and such. But I think the feat system in 5th edition is quite good. I've had a good experience with it. And I think if you are interested in kind of spicing up your game a little bit, maybe if some of the classes and the basic stuff in the player's handbook is getting a little boring to you, look at the feats. Try taking a feat. It can be really fun. It can be really cool. and it's just a way to further customize your character. All right, that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Sorry, this one was kind of a short one. I hope to, be maybe making like 30 to 45, maybe even to hour-long podcasts in the future. And sorry again for such the long break in the middle, but I'm back on track. I'm excited to continue making this podcast. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.